A light below the trail at night means somebody has fallen. That's not an interpretation. That's the only thing it can mean. In 18 years of backcountry work, I have never once seen a headlamp off-tread in the dark that wasn't attached to somebody having the worst night of their life. You go to it. You go to it fast, and you go to it talking. Because a hurt person in the dark needs to hear a voice more than they need anything else you're carrying. On the night of September 2nd, 2016, at approximately 9:40 p.m., about a quarter mile below the second saddle on Trail 44, I saw a white LED about 40 feet below the tread. In the trees, swinging the way a headlamp swings when somebody is trying to stand up. And I did what the appendix said. I did not call out. I did not point my light at it. I walked. The light came up to the tread behind me and followed me for 11 minutes. Then it went out into the middle of the air. I know what's below that section of trail, because I'd walked the ridge above it in daylight 200 times. And I'd flown it in a Bell 407 in 2013 on a body recovery. Where that light was, there is nothing. There is a slab that runs at 50-something degrees for 190 feet and then goes vertical. The light hovered out there, maybe 60 feet off the rock, at the height of a person standing on a floor that does not exist. And then it turned around. And I could tell it turned around because the beam swung across the trees, and it started walking back the way we'd come. I'd like to tell you that was the strangest night of my career. It was the fourth strangest. And I'd like to tell you I reported it. What I actually did was reach the junction, key the mic, and say the words the appendix tells you to say, which are, "Dispatch 4180, corridor clear, off at the trailhead." Because there's no code for the other thing. That's the part nobody warns you about. There is a federal document that tells you exactly what to do, and it does not include telling anyone. My name is Ward Delahoyd. I'm a forest protection officer with the U.S. Forest Service. 18 years now, all of it in Region 6. And since 2011, my primary duty area has been the Van Butte Corridor on the Tallow Box Ranger District of the Chimney Fork National Forest in the southern Oregon Cascades. Trail 44 leaves the Hannaford Creek trailhead at 2,940 feet, crosses Hannaford Creek on a wooden bridge at mile 2.4, switchbacks up through a mixed conifer stand that's never been logged because nobody could get a road in, and runs the ridge past the burned foundation of the Van Butte Lookout to a lake called Cutthroat. The sign says 9.2 miles. The Forest Service Atlas says 9.6. The 2004 quad says 8.8. I've measured it with a wheel 3 times and gotten 3 answers within about 400 feet of each other, which is normal for a trail on a slope, and which I never thought about twice until I did. I want to describe what the job actually is, because people have a fantasy about it. And the fantasy is going to make the rest of this harder to believe. Most of my week is human waste and paper. I check self-issue wilderness permits, and I log them for recreation use estimates. I write warnings for campfires inside the lake buffer, which is 100 feet on the Chimney Fork and which nobody reads. I dig out toilet paper blooms. I cut blowdown with a cross-cut saw because you can't run a chainsaw in designated wilderness, and I've got the right shoulder of a man who owns a cross-cut saw. I tell people from Portland that, no, there's no water at mile 6 after August, and no, your dog cannot make it. And yes, that afternoon buildup means what you think it means. The other half of the job is search and rescue and initial attack on fire. Our district averages maybe 5 significant SAR callouts. A season across 340,000 acres. Most of them close inside 12 hours. Somebody descends the wrong drainage. Somebody waits out a thunder cell under a rock. Somebody's phone dies and their spouse calls the sheriff at 10 at night. You find them, you give them a Gatorade, and you don't make them feel stupid about it. Then there's the Vantine corridor. Here's the number that ate 9 years of my life. You can build it yourself out of records anybody can request. Between 1958 and 2021, the Tallow Box Ranger District logged 36 persons reported overdue or missing in the Vantine Butte area. 24 of the 36 originate from a 4.1-mile segment of Trail 44 between the Hannaford Creek Bridge and the Lookout Junction. 11 were never located, not partially. No boot, no pack, no fabric, no bone, nothing a dog ever hit on. If you ask the Chimney Fork Public Affairs officer about that, and I have in writing, twice you get a paragraph about steep terrain, cold water drainage, decomposition in wet forest, and the statistical dangers of inference from small samples. Every clause in that paragraph is defensible. None of it is an answer. I took the corridor over from Wendell Sipes in the spring of 2011. Wendell had 29 years on the district. Big man, as slow-moving, a rolled can of Copenhagen in his shirt pocket for 30 of those years, and never once did I see him take any. He had a way of not answering a question that made you feel like you'd been answered. We walked the first 3 miles together on a Thursday in April. And he narrated the way any outgoing officer narrates. This culvert plugs, keep a shovel in the rig. The Fenwick family runs cattle below, and they're straight with you, but their gait lies. Don't trust the register box. The hasp is shot, and the notebook wicks water. That spring at 3.9 is the last reliable water, and it's not reliable. At the Hannaford Creek Bridge, he stopped. I should describe that bridge, because it matters later. 2 peeled log stringers on concrete sills, decked with rough-cut 2x10s, 26 feet clear span, 1 handrail on the upstream side, and a gap on the downstream side where the rail's been scheduled since Clinton. The creek under it drops 11 feet into a slot and disappears under a rock lip, and it is loud. 2 men standing on that deck have to talk over it. Wendell put a hand on the post and said, "You're across before sundown, or you're not across." Say again. Local sunset, not dusk, not when you can't see your boots. Sunset, it's a printed number. Look it up. You're on the west bank at sunset. You stay on the west bank till the sun's up. I looked at the deck. I looked at the stringers, which were old but which I'd have run a mule string over. Is it a load problem? Because if there's a rating issue, I need paper on it. Wendell, I've got crews. It's in the appendix, he said, and started walking. That was the first time anybody said the word appendix to me. I asked twice more. Once at the top of the switchbacks, when I said I'd want to see the engineering. He said there wasn't any. And once at the tailgate, when I said, if that structure's unsafe after dark, I have to be able to explain it to a 19-year-old with a Pulaski. And he said the thing I'd hear in 6 different mouths over the next 9 years. You don't explain it. You put it on the briefing and you don't take questions. 2 days later, District Ranger Marguerite Ochiltree closed her office door and slid a gray binder across the desk with a signature sheet clipped to the cover. Regional Supplement 2300-63-1, Appendix C Vantine Butte Corridor, Patrol Standards and Contact Conditions, Interim, not for public release, not for reproduction. Surrender to District on reassignment or separation. If you don't work for us, that means nothing. If you do, it's wrong in a specific way. Regional supplements are real. Region 6 issues them constantly. They're how a region adds local requirements to a national manual. The numbering convention is the fiscal year. 2300-2018-1, 2300-2019-2, like that. There is no convention under which a supplement is numbered 63. And the 2300 series is Recreation and Wilderness. And every supplement I've ever handled in that series has been posted publicly, because the whole point of a supplement is that the field needs to be able to find it. I signed. She watched me sign. "Read Appendix C tonight," she said. "The whole thing, not skimming." "Marguerite, what is this?" "Corridor Protocol. It's a supplement with a fiscal year that isn't a fiscal year." "It's interim guidance," she said. "It's been interim since 1963. 48 years of interim. Read Appendix C. And when I have questions." She took her glasses off, which I learned over the next decade meant she was about to be honest with me in a way that cost her something. "You ask them in this office, standing up, not on the radio, not in email, not on the trail." I read it that night with a beer I didn't finish. Sections A and B were what the cover promised. Patrol frequency, reporting chain, tread standards, drainage structure spacing, stock restrictions, sanitation. Boilerplate. Real. Boring in the specific way that means a professional wrote it in a real office. Appendix C was titled Contact Conditions, ran 19 pages, and was formatted like a fire order numbered items. Imperative voice, no rationale. And every single item carried a revision date in the right margin. C-1. Personnel shall not raise the voice above conversational level within the corridor. Revision, April 1963. That's the oldest one. Somebody in 1963 sat down and wrote a federal directive against shouting, and apparently thought that was sufficient. C-4. Whistle signals. A single blast of any duration shall be treated as a contact and shall be investigated per standard procedure. A second blast originating from the same bearing shall terminate the patrol. Personnel shall return to the trailhead by the route walked in. Personnel shall not investigate, respond, or reply. Revision. July 1971. C-7. Any person who uses your name before you have offered it shall not be assisted, followed, or answered. Continue past at walking pace. Do not confirm by looking back. Revision May 1986. C-9. Cessation of passerine vocalization within an approximate 200-yard radius, sustained beyond 90 seconds, shall terminate the patrol. Departure shall be immediate and shall not be delayed for equipment recovery. Reverend June, 1966. C-11. The Hannaford Creek footbridge shall not be crossed after local sunset. Personnel west of the structure at sunset shall remain west of the structure until sunrise. Revision, September 1963. C-14. Trail markers displaying any designation other than 44 indicate corridor deviation. Personnel shall reverse course immediately. Marker discrepancies shall not be transmitted by radio, cellular telephone, or satellite messenger. Report in person, district office, same day. Revision, August 1994. C-16. Unattended automated imaging is prohibited within the corridor. Revision, October 1979. C-19. Personnel shall not read coordinates, elevations, or bearings aloud from any electronic device within the corridor. Revision, June 2004. C-22. Given names shall not be used on the radio within the corridor. Identification by badge number only. Name tapes, engraved equipment, and personalized items shall not be carried. Revision, May 1986. C-25. The Light Rule. Revision, March 1992. C-27. Personnel shall not enter the corridor twice in one calendar day. Reverend June 2004. 30 items. 30 revision dates spread across 41 years. I want to be honest about my reaction, because it's the whole reason any of this happened. I laughed at C9. I've got a wildlife background. 2 years of undergrad ornithology before I switched to forest management. And I still keep a list. Cessation of passerine vocalization is a real, dull, thoroughly described phenomenon with a dozen ordinary causes. Accipiter overhead, weasel in the duff, a barometric drop, a human being standing still for a minute and a half. Birds go quiet on me twice a week in June, and what it means is that a sharp-shinned hawk is working the understory. Not that the woods have taken an interest in me. And C16, prohibiting unattended cameras. In 1979, before anybody had unattended cameras. That's a rule written against a technology that didn't exist. I read that one out loud to my empty kitchen. So I made the call any competent person makes. I decided the binder was scar tissue. Some people died in that drainage in the 50s and 60s. And rather than admit the district had a hazard it couldn't sign or engineer away, some regional staffer wrote superstition into imperative voice, stapled a date on it, and it had been photocopying itself forward ever since, because in 50 years, nobody has ever been promoted for deleting a safety rule. I've seen it happen. Every agency has fossils in its directives. I followed the rules anyway. I follow rules. That's most of what a protection officer is. But following isn't believing. And for 5 years, I followed without believing. And that place let me. I think about that more than anything now. How much patience it had with me. The first 4 seasons produced nothing I couldn't file. And I mean that literally. Because the Forest Service has a form for nearly every category of wrongness. And once a thing is on a form, it becomes ordinary. The register box, for instance. Wooden box on a post, spiral notebook, pencil on a string, voluntary. Maybe one party and 6 signs it. I pull the sheets weekly. Starting in 2012, I started logging sign-ins with no matching sign-out. That happens constantly and means nothing. People forget on the way down. What doesn't happen constantly is the opposite, which I also started logging. Parties who signed out in the afternoon with no sign-in that morning, and hands I couldn't match to anything. Whose vehicles never appeared in the lot on days I was parked at that trailhead from first light to dark. I counted, because counting is what I do. June 2012 through September 2014. 19 unmatched exits. 19 parties. 52 individuals by their own numbers, who wrote themselves out of a wilderness they were never recorded entering. At a trailhead I was sitting at. Not one of them was ever reported missing. That's what got its hooks in me. If 52 people had gone up there and vanished, I'd have had 52 families and a national news story. I had 0 phone calls, which means either those entries were written by people who don't exist, or written by people who left by some route that never generated a single worried spouse. I filed it as a data quality issue. That's a sentence I still don't like typing. Then the tread. June 2013, mile 5.1 in the timber. Standard maintenance patrol. And I came onto about 140 feet of tread that had been worked. Recently. Fresh cut on the back slope, spoil thrown correctly downhill. 3 new drain dips with the outlets daylighted, and the whole thing benched to about 30 inches, which is wider than our standard. Nobody had been up there. I was the maintenance program for that corridor. I had no crew assignment, no volunteer agreement, no partner group, no youth corps, nothing. And 140 feet of new benches, 2 people for a day and a half. I ran it every way. I called the Siskiyou Mountain Club and the 2 local trail nonprofits and asked if they'd freelanced. Nobody had. I checked whether an outfitter's packer had done it as a courtesy, which happens. No. Here's what made it worse. The tool marks were wrong. You can read tool marks in fresh bench-like handwriting. That cut had been made with a hand tool with a narrower bit than anything in our cache, closer to an old pattern grub hoe than to the Pulaskis and Rogue hoes we've run since I've been alive. And the spoil was keyed in, packed with the back of the blade in short overlapping strokes, which is a technique I've only ever seen in CCC-era photographs, and once from an 80-year-old volunteer in Idaho who learned it from his father. I photographed it and put it in the log as unattributed maintenance. Quality acceptable, no action, which is a real disposition. And I moved on because I had 11 other trails. In August, I went back to check the dips before fall rain. The bench was gone, not overgrown, gone. 22-inch tread, native surface, side cast slumped, moss on the back slope, 2 old dips in the wrong places, and the whole 140 feet indistinguishable from every other stretch of that trail and looking like nobody had touched it in 15 years. You cannot unbench a trail. Physically, that's a week of work moving soil back, and it would show, and the moss alone takes years. I have both sets of photographs. I've shown them to 2 trail engineers, separately, without context. Both said the same thing, which is that they were obviously different locations, and both got irritated with me when I gave them the GPS coordinates. Here's the one that stopped my laughing. August 19th, 2014. Solo, clear, high pressure, dead calm, temperature around 80. Mile 6.2 in the old burn, the 1987 chimney complex, took 900 acres off the north-facing slope, and the standing dead is still up there. Silver snags, no canopy, ceanothus to your chest, and young fir coming in. At 3:12 in the afternoon, the birds stopped. I know the time because I looked at my watch, and I looked at my watch because I'd been listening to a mixed flock working the brush, chestnut-backed chickadees, a couple of kinglets, a red-breasted nuthatch, the ordinary August racket. And it went off like somebody had pulled a plug. First thought, accipiter. That is the correct first thought, and I stood still and scanned because I wanted to see the hawk. 20 seconds, 40. I've done enough point counts to tell you exactly what happens next. The flock goes quiet, the raptor commits or drifts, and within a minute, somebody risks a call note and the volume comes back up in stages. 90 seconds, nothing. 2 minutes, no call notes, no wing beat, no red squirrel. And in a burn you hear red squirrels, they're relentless. No grasshoppers. At 80 degrees, in a ceanothus field in August. 2.5 minutes. The rule is 90 seconds, an immediate departure without recovering equipment. I want to describe what it felt like, because it's the closest thing to evidence I have, and it is worth nothing as evidence. I did not feel watched. I've felt watched. You feel watched with a bear, and you feel it in the back of your neck. This was the opposite. It felt like a channel had been muted, like standing in a kitchen the moment the refrigerator shuts off. Except the refrigerator was 900 acres of living hillside. I picked up my pack, which is technically non-compliant, and I walked out fast without running. And at about mile 5.4, the sound came back. Not gradually, all at once, at full volume, mid-flock, like a needle set back down in the middle of a track. Then I spent 6 weeks trying to kill the anomaly with data, because that's what I am. Barometric trace from the tallow box RAWS for that afternoon, flat. No aircraft on the track logs, and anyway a plane buys you 8 seconds of silence, not 150. Nothing in the PNSN seismic catalog above magnitude 1.0 within 80 miles. No smoke transport, nearest fire was in California. And then I did the exact wrong thing. And it's the thing that makes me certain the appendix was written by people who have watched 100 of me do it. I went back with cameras, 4 Reckonix units. My own, not agency, the same model our wildlife program runs for carnivore surveys. Passive infrared trigger, no glow IR flash, 3-frame burst, time-stamped, and a data field that stamps temperature and moon phase on every image. I set them on August 30th, 2014, at miles 6.2. 2 facing the tread from opposite sides, 40 feet apart. 2 facing uphill into the brush, locked to trees with cable and python locks. That violates C-16, which prohibits unattended automated imaging, and which I had personally read out loud and laughed at. I pulled the cards on September 14th. 2 of the 4 cameras were fine. Deer, a gray fox, 1,100 frames of Ceanothus moving in wind. A hiker with 2 dogs off-leash who I would have sighted if I'd been standing there. The 3rd camera had 406 frames with nothing in them. Not blank, properly exposed daylight frames of an empty trail. Triggered 3-frame burst, correct timestamp, nothing in the field of view. That's not unusual by itself. PIR triggers fire on thermal gradients, and you get false positives all day in sun-dappled brush. What's unusual is that I plotted the timestamps. 406 triggers across 15 days, and they are not randomly distributed. They come in runs, and in every run, the interval between consecutive triggers is between 1.4 and 2.1 seconds, and the runs last between 40 seconds and 4 minutes. I sat at my table with a spreadsheet and worked out what a 1.7-second average interval means for a heat source moving through a PIR detection zone, and then I got up and walked around my kitchen for a while. It's a walking cadence, a slow one, the cadence of a person on a grade. Something with a thermal signature large enough to trigger a passive infrared sensor walked past that camera and runs, at a human pace, 406 times in 15 days, in full daylight, and did not appear in a single frame. The 4th camera is the one I keep in a safe. It has 109 images. 108 of them are ordinary brush, wind. A bear on September 3rd at 05:11. Image 109 is time-stamped, September 14th, 2014, 11:32:16 a.m., 71 degrees. It's me. Me on the tread with my pack on and a rogue hoe over my shoulder, looking off to the left in the shirt I was wearing, and my GPS track, my own personal Garmin, which I'd started carrying for exactly this reason, puts me at that camera at 11:40:03. 8 minutes early. Same clothes, same tool, same posture I hold when I'm walking uphill with a hoe. I have had that image examined by a forensic imaging consultant in Eugene, who does insurance work and who I told a partial truth to. His report says the file's EXIF data is internally consistent, that there's no evidence of splicing or resampling, that the camera's clock drift over the deployment was under 2 seconds, and that the illumination and shadow angles in image 109 are consistent with its stated timestamp and not with 11:40. That last part is the one I'd like somebody to explain to me. The shadows are 8 minutes wrong in the right direction. C-16 has a revision date of October 1979. Unattended automated imaging, prohibited, 26 years before I could have bought a trail camera at a farm store. Which means either somebody in 1979 was extraordinarily lucky with their phrasing, or somebody in 1979 had cameras up there. The bridge rule is the one that gave me my worst night, and I want to be clear that I obeyed it, and it still cost me something. October 6th, 2015. I'd gone in late to deal with a hazard tree over the tread at mile 3.2. A leaning white fir with a hinge crack, the kind you have to fall or closed the trail. It took me longer than it should have. I was on the west bank of Hannaford Creek at 6:41 p.m., and local sunset was 6:38. 3 minutes. I stood on that bank looking at 26 feet of decking, and my truck 8/10 of a mile beyond it. And I made the correct decision for the wrong reason, which is that I'd have had to write it up if anything happened. And I put up my tarp on the west bank and boiled water and got into a bag I'd only brought because I'm the kind of man who always has one. At 2:50 in the morning, I woke up because a crew was crossing the bridge. That's what it sounded like. Boots on decking, that hollow knock rough-cut lumber makes over moving water. And voices, 2 men and a woman, conversational, over the creek noise, the specific cadence of people who've worked together long enough to talk about nothing. I lay there and listened to 3 people walk eastbound across a bridge I was camped 40 feet from. In the dark, in October, 6.8 miles from any road but mine. And I want to be honest about this too. I did not get up. I lay in a bag on the ground with my hand on a flashlight I did not turn on. And I listened to them cross, and then to the sound of boots on tread going east and up until the creek took it. And I did not get up. And the reason I didn't is that I could hear one of them laughing, and I did not want to know what that looked like. At first light, I walked down to the bridge. The deck was gone. 22 2x10s, unbolted, stacked in 2 neat piles on the west abutment, on my side, in the order they'd come off, with the 66 lag screws in a coffee can that is not mine and that I have in my garage. 2 peeled log stringers, bare, 26 feet over a slot. There were wet boot prints on the stringers, going east. 3 sets on 8-inch wide log tops, from the west sill to the east sill, and no prints on the east bank at all, because the east bank is rock. I want to tell you what that means to somebody who does my job. Decking a bridge is a 2-person day. Undecking one is faster, but it's not quiet. And I was 40 feet away in a tarp shelter, and I heard 3 people walk across a deck that was, at that moment, in 2 stacks at their feet. I redecked that bridge myself over 2 days with a battery impact and my own lag screws. And I filed a facilities condition report that said, decking displaced, probable vandalism, repaired in place, recommend signage. And I signed it 4180. That's a lie in a federal document, and I'd write it again. Because sitting in the district office that afternoon, I finally read C11 the way it's actually written. It doesn't say the bridge is unsafe. It doesn't say anything about the structure at all. It says personnel west of the structure at sunset shall remain west of the structure until sunrise. It's not protecting me from a bridge. It's keeping me on a specific side of a creek for a specific number of hours. Somebody in September of 1963 decided which bank I stand on. Now the part I've told before, in 3 different rooms, to people with recorders. August 11th, 2017. Arliss Kernahan, 61, retired schoolteacher out of Medford, and her husband Ted, 64. Overnight to Cutthroat Lake, out and back, a trip they'd done 6 times since the 90s. Permit in the box, vehicle in the lot, itinerary with their daughter. Ted came out alone at 2:20 the next afternoon and drove to the ranger station instead of calling, because there's no service. And he was so calm that our front desk had him wait 11 minutes. His statement, which I took myself, is this: they camped at the lake. In the morning, Arliss got up before him and went to filter water. He heard her talking to somebody. He got up 8 or 9 minutes later, and she was gone. And so was the filter, and so was her hat. And he spent 5 hours looking around a lake you can walk around in 40 minutes. I was IC. That's the fact that matters. We ran it as a Type 3. 68 searchers over 4 operational periods. 3 K9 teams. one HRD dog on the second day, a Black Hawk out of the guard for the high insertions, an IR flight the second night, a Swiftwater team on Hannaford Creek down to the confluence. Every polygon on that segment went to at least 80% probability of detection, and 3 of them went twice. On the second operational period, at 10:51, Team Charlie reported a whistle. Single long blast bearing 190 from the outlet basin. They went to it. That's correct. That's exactly what they were supposed to do. At 10:53, they reported a second blast. Same bearing, same duration. And Charlie's team leader, a Jackson County volunteer with 14 years, a man named Deshaun Prine, 41, a mechanic, a father of 2, keyed up and said, "I see, Charlie, we've got a repeat on that whistle, same bearing. Advise." I was in a command trailer with a map on the wall, and a woman's husband sitting in a folding chair 11 feet away from me. There is a document in my safe called Appendix C, and item C-4 says a second blast from the same bearing terminates the patrol. And I said, "Charlie, I see. Continue to the source. Report on contact." I said it in the ordinary voice you use for the ordinary 100th transmission of a long morning. Deshaun Prine said, "Charlie copies, continuing." 2 members of Team Charlie came out at 16:40. Both of them state that they were within visual of Prine, that they were spread on a line, 30 to 40 feet, in open timber, on a moderate slope, in bright sun, and that they were talking, and that he was there, and that he was not. Both of them state that they heard him for approximately 10 minutes after that. Both of them state he was telling them he was fine. We searched 14 more days for Deshaun Prine and 9 for Arliss Kernahan. Everything we had. A magnetometer flight in October because Prine was carrying a radio and a knife and a steel water bottle and a wedding ring. We found her hat, green sun hat, on a rock, in a polygon that had been cleared twice. We found nothing of him. Arliss Kernahan and Deshaun Prine are both carried as presumed deceased, cause undetermined, body not recovered. I gave 4 statements. Forest Service Serious Accident Investigation Team, Jackson County, an OSHA contractor, and a regional review team out of Portland in the district conference room with the blinds down. The first 3 wrote down the word whistle. The 4th did not say that word out loud one time in 55 minutes. She asked me for the bearing. She asked me for the interval between blasts, and when I said about 2 minutes, she asked me to confirm it was under 3. And when I said yes, she looked at the man beside her, and he made a single mark on a page, and she said, "Thank you, Officer Delahoyd, that's useful." Useful. Like I'd completed a field on a form somebody's been filling out since before I was born. That's where I stopped being a man who follows rules and started being a man who reads. Federal SAR documentation is genuinely rigorous. The ICS 214 unit logs, the 204 assignment sheets, the debriefing forms, the search maps with POD penciled in the corner. A 14-day Type 3 generates 2 bankers' boxes, and every hour of it is auditable. And I know because I signed most of it. The Kernahan Prine boxes have a hole in them. Operational Period 3, August 14th. Team Foxtrot, 4 searchers, assigned the outlet basin below where Charlie lost Prine. Their 214 has a 1512 entry. Located Sunhat, Green, Cotton on Rock. Flagged in place. Photographed. Cords to plans. The photograph exists. I've held it. The flagging existed. I pulled it myself in September. The coordinates in the log are right. I've stood on the rock. 2 of Foxtrot's 4 remember the find in detail. Who spotted it? The argument about whether to bag it. One of them remembers being angry that somebody picked it up. The 3rd remembers August 14th as a clear. No find. He remembers being frustrated. He remembers where they ate a downed log at the outlet. And he remembers a conversation about his sister's divorce. The fourth remembers the log and the divorce conversation and says the hat was already bagged by then. Now, memory is garbage. I know that better than most. 3 people at a car wreck give you 4 vehicles and 2 colors. So I pulled every missing person file from that corridor back to 1958. All 36, and looked for that exact shape. 10 of them have it. 10 separate incidents across 63 years in which multiple searchers assigned to one team on one operational period hold materially incompatible accounts of that period. Always internal to a single team. Always at least one member who believes something happened that the others deny, or believes nothing happened when the others documented a find. 1966, 1971, 1979, 1986, twice in 1994, 2001, 2004, 2011, 2017. Those years should look familiar. 9 of the 10 are within 90 days of a revision date in Appendix C. I anonymized the numbers and sent them to a woman I went to grad school with, who now does human factors work for a regional air carrier. She's the person who figures out why a crew misread an altimeter. She called me on a Sunday and asked about exposure. Altitude, hypoxia, carbon monoxide from stoves and tents, sleep deprivation, benzodiazepines, confined space, CO2. I said, day operations, 5,000 feet, 12-hour shifts, mixed volunteers and professionals, no confined spaces. She was quiet a while and then said, Ward, I've got nothing for you. That's not a rate I've seen in an industry where this kills people. Then I found the thing that convinced me this is administered rather than merely known about. And it isn't dramatic. It's an accounting record. Trail maintenance on our forest is tracked in an infrastructure database. Every trail is broken into segments with unique identifiers, and every segment carries condition surveys, deferred maintenance estimates, and completed work with the crew, the date, the hours, and the funding code. I pulled the full history for Trail 44. 61 years of it. Trail 44 has, at various times, contained 12 segments. Today it has 9. Segments 44-06, 44-07, and 44-11 have no corresponding ground. I mean that literally. I took the segment endpoints from the database. They're stored as coordinate pairs, and I walked to them. 44-06 begins in the middle of a talus field and ends 400 meters later on a 50-degree slab. 44-11 begins 200 meters east of the Lookout Foundation and runs 1.3 miles across a face that has never had a trail on it and could not hold one. Those 3 segments carry between them 411 completed work entries between 1961 and 2019. Real entries. Crew designation 2019. Real entries. Crew designations that match real crews I can trace to real people, some of whom are alive. Hours logged. Funding codes that reconcile. Brushing, tread restoration, drainage structure installation, logout. There's an entry from June 1988 for replace 14 linear feet punchin on 44-11. And punchin is a thing you build across a boggy spot. And 44-11 is a rock face at a 35% grade. There is one entry that I've read maybe 200 times. October 1997. Segment 44-07. Crew designation TB-4. 16 hours. Work type tread obliteration. Tread obliteration. That's a real work type. It's what you do when you decommission a trail and don't want people following it. 16 hours of obliterating a trail that had, according to the same database, received tread restoration in 1994, and would receive brushing in 2001. I found one member of TB4, retired in Grants Pass, 79 years old, sharp. I told him I was doing a historical maintenance reconstruction, which was true. He remembered the crew. He remembered the boss. He remembered the fall of 1997 and the smoke from the Big Butte fire. He said they never worked the east side of the butte, not once in 6 seasons. Then he said, without me asking anything, "There was a couple of weeks that October we got sent in and came out, and I couldn't have told you what we did. Boss said tread work. I remember driving in, and I remember driving out, and I remember my hands hurt." He was quiet a second. "You know, I thought about that for years, and then I stopped. I went to the old-timers next, not the seasonals. The 20-plus year people whose boots were on that tread when those revision dates were assigned. I want to describe what I hit, because it wasn't stonewalling. Stonewalling I could work with. It was more disciplined than that. Every one of them answered a slightly different question. Wendell Sipes, on his porch outside Butte Falls, with a coffee he didn't refill. What's the bridge rule about? You follow it? Yes. Then it's working. Wendell, that's not... Ward. He set the cup on the rail. You want to know, so you can figure out when it doesn't apply. That's what knowing's for. That's what it's always for. He looked at his woodpile. Don't come back with the bridge. Loretta Vitas, district hydrologist, ran stream surveys in that basin from 1992 to 1998. Did anything ever happen to you up there? I stopped taking that reach in 98. Why? Ask me about substrate. I'll tell you about substrate all day. I've got beautiful data. 5 field seasons. She had 7. Bill Sanquist, fire, 33 years, who I've known since 2003 and who's been drunk at my kitchen table. Bill, what's a C4? Long pause. Where'd you hear that? Dispatch logged one on me in 2012. He got up and rinsed his glass and stood at the sink with his back to me. You know what I never once did in 33 years? Take an engine up the Hannaford Road after dark. Not one time. Nobody ever told me not to. He set the glass in the rack. You learn a lot watching where the old guys park. And Marguerite Ochiltree, my own district ranger, in her office, the day after I found the maintenance billing. I laid the printouts on her desk, 411 work entries on ground that doesn't exist. She read for a long time, longer than she needed to. Then she said, I know. You know. I found 44-11 in 2009, before you got here. She squared the pages. I wrote a memo. It went to the forest. The forest sent it to the region. And 11 days later, I got a phone call from a number with no name attached to it. And a man told me the segments were retained for continuity of record and asked me not to reconcile them. Continuity of record. That's what he said. Who was he? He never said, and I never asked. And I have thought about that decision every year since. She looked up at me. Ward, I'm going to tell you the only useful thing I know. In this job, you'll get one chance to be the person who insists. Spend it on something you can win. June 2018, mile 7.4, past the Lookout Junction. Trail 44 is signed with standard carcinite, the flexible fiberglass posts with a routed plaque or reflective decal showing the number. We've been installing them since about 1990. Before that, blazes and cedar signs and institutional memory. I came around the turn, and the marker said 812. Not faded, not vandalized, not a right post with a wrong plaque bolted on by a confused volunteer. The whole assembly was internally consistent post-plaque, stainless hardware, weathered to the same degree as everything else in that stretch, and set with a specific forward lean a post takes after 12 or 15 winters of frost heave. Moss on the base, undisturbed soil. There is no Trail 812 on the Chimney Fork National Forest. There's an 812 on the Umpqua, 110 miles north. I stood there 3 minutes running the rational sequence. Contractor error, sign shop mix-up, scout project, volunteers with the wrong box. Then I remembered I'd walked past that post 9 days earlier, and it had said 44 because I'd leaned my saw against it while I bucked a log. And I photographed the saw against a marker for every log I cut. That's how we document hazard work. That photograph is on my phone right now, June 11th, 2018, 10:52 a.m. Saw against post, 44, C-14. Reverse course immediately. Do not transmit by radio, cellular, or satellite messenger. I turned around. And the thing that made my hands shake wasn't the number. It was that the urge to report it was the strongest physical compulsion I have ever felt in the field. And I've been on a division that lost its anchor point in wind. Stronger than fear. Twice on the way down, I found my hand on my radio without having decided to put it there. And the second time, my thumb was on the bar. I walked 7.5 miles with my hand deliberately off that radio and drove to the district office and told Marguerite, standing up with the doors shut. She wrote it in a hardbound logbook from a locked drawer, not the district log, a different book, and I could see it was better than half full. Then she said, "Did you photograph it?" "No." "Good. Don't ever." "Why not?" She capped the pen, which meant she'd answer. Because in 1994, this district ran a photo point inventory in that corridor. 188 established points, same tripod positions, same focal length, same bearings, 90-day rotation, standard monitoring. We did it in a dozen places. And in August of '94, they amended Appendix C and killed the program. C-14 and C-16 both have August '94 revisions. She put the book back in the drawer. I've read the termination memo. It says the program was discontinued as not cost-effective. I have never seen one of those photographs. There's no accession record and no box. 700-some images and there's no box, Ward. They came in July 2019. 2 white Suburbans, government plates, no shields, staged out of the Hannaford trailhead for 9 days. Their special use authorization was taped inside the windshield where the public can read it, so I read it. And I photographed it, which is legal. Issued to a cooperator under a reimbursable agreement. The purpose line said Bat Acoustic and Roost Inventory. The cooperating entity was the Interagency Baseline Office. I have spent every year since looking for the Interagency Baseline Office. It's not in the USDA directory. It's not in the Interior directory. It has never appeared in an appropriations bill, a budget justification, an agency financial report, or the Federal Register. And I have read a lot of budget justifications. It has an office symbol, a mailing address in Silver Spring, Maryland, and a fax number that answers on the second ring with a handshake tone. The bat cover was good, and it was a cover. They did have Onabot detectors, and they deployed them correctly, and I watched a young tech do a proper emergence count at the Lookout Foundation. But you don't bring a total station on a bat survey. They had 1 theodolite and EDM on a tripod with prisms packed in on a mule. You bring a total station when you need to know exactly where something is. To the millimeter, repeatedly, over years. They shot the bridge. They shot the lookout footings. They shot 4 points on the tread that, as far as I can tell, aren't marked with anything. They also had a differential GNSS base station running 2-hour occupations, and 2 cases I couldn't place, one with a pressure relief valve on it. I got one real conversation, day 6 at the bridge, with their team lead, a woman in her 40s named Dr. Adrienne Sokol. Field competent in a way I noticed immediately. Broken-in boots, a pack she'd clearly loaded 1,000 times, stepped over blowdown instead of on it. I said, "You're reshooting the 94 photo points." She didn't blink. "Some of them." That program was discontinued as not cost-effective. "That's right." "Doctor, I've read Appendix C." "I know," she said. "You're 4180. You had the 17 fatality, the 18 marker report, and a camera deployment in 2014 you never wrote up." There it was. Some office in Maryland had my badge number, my incidents, and the gap in my paperwork. I said, "Then give me one thing. Is the corridor getting bigger?" She looked at the deck of that bridge a long moment. Her tech was 30 feet off with headphones on. "The corridor is defined administratively," she said. "That's not an answer. It's the only true one." She shifted her weight. "The boundaries in your appendix are the boundaries of the protocol, not of the phenomenon. We don't know the boundaries of the phenomenon. What we know is where the protocol has held. So it is getting bigger." I said where it's held. "Then give me your office's actual position, not the authorization language." And she surprised me. She said, "All right. Nobody in my office believes we're containing anything. There's no containment. There's no perimeter, no barrier, no field, nothing to breach. What we maintain is a low-variance behavioral envelope in a place that appears to reproduce whatever variance we introduce. That's the program. That's been the entire program since 1963. Reproduce. That's the working word. We've had better ones. They all overpromise. And the total station? What are you measuring? The bridge. Has it moved?" Sokol picked up her pack, and she said, verbatim, "I wrote it in my rig within the hour. 26 feet, 4 1/8 inches. Same in 1994. Same in 1963. She started up the trail. It's a very well-behaved bridge. Then she stopped and turned around and said the only thing she ever said to me that sounded like a person instead of a position. "You're C-27. The rule against entering twice in a day. Do you know why once?" "No. Neither do we. Twice is where the 2004 data broke." She adjusted a strap. "That's what every number in that book is. Somebody's edge case. Try not to be one." In February 2020, I did the most boring, brave thing of my life, which was file an internal records request. Not FOIA internal. I had a legitimate business need. I was writing a corridor safety analysis, which was true, and Marguerite approved it, which surprised me until I understood she wanted somebody to look and needed it not to be her. I got 4 boxes at the regional office and a reading room with a window and a records officer who checked on me every 40 minutes. What's in those boxes isn't a conspiracy. That's what nobody believes when I say it. There's no cover-up in the movie sense. What's in those boxes is a federal program run competently, cheaply, and without explanation for 57 years. 1958. The origin. A district ranger's incident narrative, typed 5 pages, over the name Halvard Enstrom. 2 employees and a contract packer went up the east side of Vantine Butte in September 1958 to scout a lookout access reroute. 2 came out. The narrative is measured and professional until page 4, where Enstrom writes, "Both survivors state independently that Mr. Kiggins was ahead of them on the trail and also behind them on the trail. I have questioned each man separately on 3 occasions, and neither will move off this statement. And I'm obliged to record that neither man appears to find it remarkable. 1963. The first Appendix C. 5 items mimeographed. Purple ink gone lavender. Item 1 is, do not shout on the east side. That's the entire rule. 1963, September. The bridge. A district fire guard named Alton Petrie crossed Hannaford Creek eastbound at approximately 8:50 p.m., about 40 minutes after local sunset, fair weather, dry deck, flashlight. His crew boss found him the next morning at the west abutment, not in the creek. On the bank he'd started from, wet to the chest, unable to give an account of the intervening 9 hours. There's a physician's letter in the file. Petrie was retired on disability in 1965, and I'm not reproducing the diagnosis because his granddaughter teaches at the middle school in Eagle Point. 1966. The Birds. May 22nd, a party of 4 scouts and 1 adult leader out of Klamath Falls. The intake sheet is in Enstrom's hand, and there's a marginal note that belongs to no form. All 4 boys state the woods went silent. All 4 stayed approximately 2 minutes. All 4 state Mr. Bewley told them to be quiet so he could listen. Bewley is one of the 11. 1971. The Whistle. 2-man trail crew. 1 went to it, 1 didn't. And the amendment memo contains a sentence I've never gotten out from under. Recommend the second signal be specified as terminating rather than the first, as the first cannot be reliably distinguished from a legitimate call for assistance, and personnel will not comply with a directive requiring them to ignore one. They knew. In 1971, somebody understood that a decent ranger will always go the first time, and wrote the protocol around our decency because they couldn't write it out of us. They let us go once. 1979. The cameras. And this is the folder that made me put my pen down. Attached to the C-16 amendment is a 2-page trip report from a regional wildlife biologist who ran an early automatic camera study in that corridor. The old 35mm Trailmaster-style rigs, film, a pressure plate, and a trip line. 4 stations. June through September, 1979. His report says the film came back with 206 frames. He says 194 are exposures of empty trail. He says the remaining 12 are photographs of the 4 camera stations, taken from a distance of 6 to 8 feet, in daylight, from an angle none of his cameras faced, on film that never left the camera bodies. And his closing paragraph, which I've memorized, I have inspected all 4 bodies for evidence of opening, and found the tape seals intact and initialed as I left them. I do not have a photographic explanation for frames 61, 62, 88, 89, 103 through 108, 197, and 198. I am confident in my handling, and I would ask not to be assigned to this unit again. 2004. The quads. The last thing I found, and the reason I finally believed in this, the way you believe in weather. USGS 7.5-minute topographic maps get revised, and revision history is public. Our quad is the Van Tyne Butte Quadrangle, and it's been issued in 1955, 1967, 1984, and 2004, plus a provisional edition in 1994. On the 1955 sheet, there is a trail drawn on the east side of the butte. Dashed line, 1.4 miles, labeled. On the 1967 sheet, it's not there. On the 1984 sheet, it's there. Same position, within the accuracy of the medium. On the 1994 provisional, it's not there. On the 2004 sheet, it's not there. And in that folder, there's a memo from a regional cartographer to the baseline office The first place I ever saw that name, noting the discrepancy, noting that the 1984 depiction is consistent with the 1955 depiction to within his measurement error, noting that he has examined the source aerial photography for the 1967 and 1994 compilations for cloud shadow, seasonal canopy closure, and film defect. I do not find a photographic or compilation explanation, he writes. I would like it on the record that I am confident in this analysis, and that I would prefer not to be asked to repeat it. I sat in that reading room with a records officer looking at me through a window every 40 minutes, and understood that there is a mile and a half of trail on the east side of that butte that is sometimes on the ground and sometimes isn't, that the United States has known it since at least 1955, that it has been maintained in the accounting system for 60 years, and that the only operational response ever adopted was to write a sentence telling me not to say a wrong number out loud over the radio. There are 25 people alive who came out of that segment with an account. I located 8. 6 talked to me. I told all 6 I was doing a retrospective safety review, which was true in the way Sokol's answers were true. Neve Ostrowski, 2011. 29 at the time, solo 3 nights, competent pack rafter, knows her pace, carries a map, and can read it. She got off her intended route somewhere past the lookout junction and walked out 4 days later at a trailhead 13 air miles north on a different district. Her account is that she followed the trail. That's the whole account. And she won't budge, and she gets angry when pressed, and I don't blame her. She followed Trail 44. The tread was good. The markers were consistent. It descended. It came out where it came out. She has a Garmin track, and she let me copy the GPX. Continuous 1-minute sampling, no gaps, 4 days. It runs from a point I can put my hand on to a trailhead that trail does not connect to, along a corridor of travel that does not exist, with a smooth, gradual profile that never exceeds 4,400 feet. There is no route between those trailheads that doesn't cross a rock band with 1,600 feet of relief. I've flown it. Her average pace over 4 days is 1.8 miles an hour. That's the pace of a person walking comfortably on maintained tread. Ted Kernigan, Arliss's husband. I went and sat in his kitchen in 2019, which is a thing I did badly and which I'd do again. He said his wife was talking to somebody at the lake at 6 in the morning. He said he lay in the tent and listened for 8 or 9 minutes because it was pleasant, because she was laughing, and because he assumed it was another camper. And then he said the thing that I have not gotten past. She kept saying his name, whoever it was. Ted, you have to see this. Ted, come look at the water. I said, Ted, she was saying your name. And he looked at me with an enormous, patient sadness and said, yeah, that's what I mean. That's why I didn't get up. 41 years, that woman never once called me Ted. Not once. I've been Teddy since 1978. Ted Kernigan has never read Appendix C. He'd never heard of C7. He worked it out himself in a tent on the worst morning of his life because he knew his wife. The other 4 contradict each other, and both of them. One man insists he was never on Trail 44 and produced, unprompted, a self-issue permit with his own signature and the trail number on it, and looked at it a while and said, well, that's my hand, in a voice I did not enjoy. One woman described the Hannaford Bridge as a steel truss with pipe rails and metal grate decking. She described the sound of her boots on the grate. She described gripping the rail because the water made her dizzy. There has been one bridge at that crossing since 1951. It is log stringers and rough-cut 2x10s, and I have personally redecked it, and there's no rail on the downstream side. but all 6 share one thing, and it took me 2 years to see it. Every one of them was, at some point, told what to do by something they believed was a person. Neve followed a trail that was signed and maintained and told her where to go. Arliss was told to come look at the water. The man who was never on 44 was put right at the junction by a ranger. An older gal, short with me, wouldn't give a name. The scouts in 1966. Mr. Bewley told them to be quiet so he could listen. It doesn't take people. It instructs them. And then they go where they were instructed. Some come back. 11 are still out there. I understood the binder in November 2020 on the concrete floor of a storage unit in Shady Cove, going through Wendell Sipes's papers after his stroke, with his son's permission, ostensibly looking for a photograph for a retirement wall. He'd kept his copy of Appendix C, which is a violation. You surrender it, and he signed the sheet. He'd kept it and annotated it. Pencil, margins, the small, hard handwriting of a man who filled out 30 years of forms. Next to C4, 2 equals, it asks twice. 3 would be too many. We'd have taught it patience. Next to C9, the silence isn't it hunting. The silence is the other animals obeying the rule. Next to C11, a P crossed a bridge that had already been crossed. Next to C16, don't show it a before and after. Next to C22, L says a name is the cheapest thing we carry and the dearest thing we hand over. And on the inside of the back cover, under a column where he'd copied out all 30 revision dates in order, he'd written 1 line and underlined it twice. This is not instructions. This is its transcript. I sat on that floor a long time, and I finally understood what I'd been carrying since 2011. That document is not a safety manual. It's a behavioral log kept from the wrong side of the glass. Every item describes something that place learned to do, phrased as a prohibition so that a tired person at mile 6 can act on it without having to understand it. 30 items is 30 demonstrated capabilities. The revision dates aren't when we got smart. They're when it did. And look at the order. 1963. Don't shout sound. 1963. A bridge, a thing we built. 1966. Silence, a thing you notice about a place. 1971. A whistle, a signaling tool we carried in our pockets. 1979. Photographs. Photographs taken from angles our cameras didn't face. 1986. A name, a social convention, and radio discipline. 1992. An artificial light, standing on a floor that isn't there. 1994. A printed trail number from a sign shop in Bend. 2004. Coordinates read aloud off a screen, and the number of times a man walks through a door in a day. That is not a list of natural hazards. There is no hazard on Earth that develops in that sequence. That's a curriculum, and it tracks our technology at about a 20-year lag. And the lag has been closing. Here's what makes it worse, and what finally told me nobody is in charge of this. Every item in Appendix C is a rule about not participating. Don't shout. Don't answer. Don't reply. Don't confirm. Don't transmit. Don't cross back. Don't signal. Don't photograph. Don't say the numbers out loud. Don't go back in the same day. There is not one item in that document that tells you how to affect that place. Not one. 57 years, a buried monitoring plant, an office in Silver Spring, synchronized detectors, a total station packed in on a mule, and the entire operational output of the program is a list of ways to be boring. We're not containing it. We're on a diet. Part 17. C31. The regional team came out again in the spring of 2021 after I filed my safety analysis, which was 41 pages and which I wrote in the flattest language I could produce and which contains no conclusions. They asked about the camera deployment in 2014. I told them. They asked whether I still had image 109, and I said no, which is a lie. They asked whether I had, at any point in 2014, walked that section of tread carrying a rogue hoe over my left shoulder while looking down slope to the west. And I sat in that chair, and I thought about it honestly, and I said, probably. That's how I carry a hoe. I've carried a hoe like that 10,000 times. The woman looked up and said, before 2014. Probably, yes. She wrote that down. That she wrote down, and underlined it. And she and the man looked at each other slightly too long. In August 2021, I got a routine email from district admin telling me to bring my copy of the supplement in for an amendment insertion. That's normal. It happened in 2004. There's a form for it. I sat in the conference room with the binder open, pulled the old Appendix C, put the new one in, and initialed the transmittal. 31 items. C-31. Automated imaging equipment recovered from the corridor shall not be reviewed by the individual who deployed it. Recovered media shall be surrendered unexamined to the district and shall not be duplicated. Personnel appearing in recovered imagery at a time and location inconsistent with their own record shall be removed from corridor assignment for the remainder of the operating season. Revision August 2021. There it is. 7 years of my life. Arliss Kernighan's hat on a rock. Deshaun Prine's 2 kids, who are 19 and 16 now, and who have never been told what their father heard. A light standing in the middle of the air over 190 feet of slab. 3 people laughing across a bridge with no deck on it. All of it compressed into 63 words of imperative voice, filed under a supplement with a fiscal year that isn't a fiscal year, with a revision date in the right margin. I'm a rule now. Somebody in 2049 is going to read C-31 at a kitchen table with a beer they don't finish and think, that is the single dumbest sentence the federal government ever put on paper. And they'll follow it anyway, because they follow rules. And it'll hold. And they will never know why it holds. They will never know it holds because a volunteer mechanic from Jackson County went to a second whistle in 2017 because I told him to over a radio in an ordinary voice. That's the system. It works. And the price of it working is that nobody is ever permitted to learn what it cost. But that's not what keeps me up. There were 31 items in that binder in August of 2021. I stayed on the corridor 1 more season, and then took a detail in fuels, and then a permanent job in recreation planning at the supervisor's office, which is a polite way of saying I now spend my days on trail funding spreadsheets and do not go up the Hannaford. I surrendered my copy on reassignment. I signed the sheet. I believed I was done. Last November, my replacement's replacement called me on a Sunday and asked to meet somewhere that wasn't a federal building. She's good. Careful, quiet, badge 4207. I'm not going to name her. We met behind the Grange Hall in Butte Falls with our trucks nose to tail like a couple of dope dealers. She said, "You wrote the 20 analysis. Wendell's son told my crew boss you had the maintenance printouts." I said I didn't have them anymore, which is a lie. They're in a fire safe in my basement with the cartographer's memo and Neve Ostrowski's GPX and Image 109. She said, "I don't need them. I need to know one thing. Did it ever go past 31? I said no, not while I had it. She took a folded photocopy out of her jacket, which is a violation, and I took it, which is also a violation. See 34. 34. 3 new items in 4 years, after 6 decades that averaged 1 every 23 months. I'm not going to reproduce C32 or C33. I've thought harder about that than about anything in my life, and I'm not going to, because one of them concerns what to do when a member of the public recites an item back to you. And I will not be the reason that sentence exists in more heads than it already does. But I'll give you C34, because C34 is why I finally wrote all of this down. C34. Personnel related by blood or marriage shall not be assigned to the corridor in the same operating season, and shall not discuss corridor assignment with one another. Personnel shall not be assigned to the corridor within one season of the assignment of any person who has previously used a personal name in reference to them. Revision, September 2025. Read that second sentence again. For 62 years, every item in that book was a rule about behavior. Don't shout, don't answer, don't reply, don't confirm, don't signal, don't photograph, don't transmit, don't cross. Behavior, because behavior was what it could see. C34 isn't about behavior. C34 is about relationships. It's a rule that requires the agency to know who loves whom, and to keep those people apart on a duty roster. Somewhere out there, in September of 2025, something happened that made a very careful office in Silver Spring, Maryland, conclude that the connection between two people is now a hazard in itself, not a name spoken in the corridor. The existence of somebody, somewhere, who has a name for you. My daughter Renna is 23. She finished her forestry degree in June, and she has applied to 2 districts on the Chimney Fork, and one of them is Tallow Box. And I have not told her not to, because I cannot tell her why. And because C34 means the agency will take care of it without either of us ever having to know that it did. I don't know what it does with that. I've stopped guessing. I went and found Halvard Enstrom's assistant ranger in 2018, 92 years old, in a memory care wing outside Roseburg, and showed him a page in his own hand from 1966. And he told me the only thing anybody ever told me that felt like the truth. He said his ranger told him in 1961, "Son, you've got one job up there. Don't teach it anything." I asked him what it was. He laughed at a real delighted old man laugh and said, "Hell, I don't know that. Nobody knows that. I'm 92. I don't even know what the sun is." Then he said, "But I know what it does. It does what we do. That's all it's ever done. You go up there and act like a man with a radio. And pretty soon there's a thing up there with a radio. Here's how it stands. Trail 44 is open. It's open right now, this morning, a Tuesday in August. It's on the Chimney Fork National Forest website with a green dot next to it. It's on all trails with 4.5 stars and 181 reviews, 6 of which mention that the bridge is sketchy but fine. Last summer, this district issued 860 wilderness permits for that area. Families, scout troops, trail runners with earbuds in, which I think about more than is good for me. Nobody checks in with anybody. There's a self-issue box at the trailhead with a spiral notebook and a pencil on a string, a sign about packing out your trash, and a laminated card about black bears. There is nothing up there that says anything true. And every single one of those 860 people walked up that tread carrying something brand new, a phrase, a piece of gear, a habit, a satellite messenger, a ringtone, a pet name for a husband, the particular way they say, "Hey, wait up." And every one of them was a lesson. And not one of them knew they were teaching. That's what I need you to sit with. Not the whistle, not the light standing in the air. 67 years and 34 rules. And every rule in that book is something we handed over by accident. We were never being hunted up there. We're being studied. We're the ones who keep supplying the material. And the binder in the locked drawer isn't a defense, It's just the part of the curriculum we've managed to write down.